Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the first decan of Leo. I hope that you're having a wonderful afternoon out there. We're going to be going over all sorts of little details about the new moon. We're going to be talking about the first decan of Leo. We're going to be talking about the tarot cards associated with that and some of the history behind that decan and some of the pressures we might be feeling around this new moon. We are going to be talking about all of the aspects that are taking place within the new moon, and then we're going to show you how it's going to unfold over time over the next few weeks. We've got some really interesting astrology coming over the next few weeks, and I'm going to help guide and hopefully shepherd you through that gracefully and with intact and with joy and peace, I hope. So if you are joining me today, please let me know in the chat. I always love seeing and hearing new people stopping in and getting to know where you're stopping in from. So if you are joining me today, please say hi in the chat. Don't be shy. We have a nice little community here. We've had an influx of some new subscribers lately. My beautiful daughter, Sophie, has a new TikTok account. It's called Sag Moon Magic, and she's been bringing a lot of her wonderful friends and supporters over. So I'm welcome to all of you if you're joining me from her account. It's so nice to have you here, and this is hopefully a nice space to be able to be yourself and to exchange ideas and to just love tarot and all of the things astrological. So welcome, friends, and I'm happy that you're joining us here today. We've got Bonnie stopping in. What's up, Bonnie? Nice to see you. Says you are ready. I am ready. I'm ready as well, Bonnie. Hope everything's going your way, my friend. So a couple things, friends, before we dive into all of the new astrology. I have a few announcements. So, of course, we're talking about the new moon in the first decan of Leo. But if you are new here, or if you're not and you want to reach out for some services, I do have a website, my friends. It's called spencermichaud.com. I offer all sorts of different readings. I have natal readings where I go over your mythological stories for your entire life cycles, where we break down your chart in depth in a 2-hour reading. I have Kairos transit readings where we're trying to get a beat on what's coming in the next 3 months. I like to look at things in these little chunks of time so that we can understand and take actionable steps towards it. Of course, I'm able to adjust some of these a little bit too. If you have an idea about something a little bit further afield, if you say, hey, what's coming next year, I can make adjustments there too. I have quarterly check-in packages. I have an oracle reading where I deal with one specific question or one issue. I also have a mini big 3 reading, a sun, moon, rising. If you're just trying to test it out and say, hey, you know what, this is, I'm not sure if this is for me, but I'd like to just try out something that you do. The big 3 is a great way to start out with that. But whenever you're ready, I'd be happy to work with any of you. I also offer astrological tutoring sessions, and I also teach astrology, tarot, and fixed stars, decans, etc. I love teaching, I love sharing wisdom, and I hope that you will work with me in the future. All right, I also have a sale going on. So to welcome some of the new people that we're welcoming into our community, and to celebrate some of my daughter's beautiful forays into this, I don't know, online community of magic and astrology and tarot and all of these things. I've been really proud of the efforts that she's been making lately. She's been doing a great job sharing her wisdom. She and I have been having some really excellent talks about just the universe and the divine and all of these things and all the things that go along with it. But I'm offering a 20% off all of my digital recordings using the code SAGMOONMAGIC, which you can find Sophie on TikTok and Instagram at SAGMOONMAGIC. But if you go to spencermichaud.com, you can find a number of webinars that have to do with either the decans, the 10-degree sections of the zodiac that incorporate the tarot into their understanding. I have a webinar called Stars and Cards that talks about the relationship between tarot and astrology and how to work with those two together. And then I also have this series with my beautiful partner Tanya Andrews of Third Coast Mojo called Dignity and Devotion, where we're breaking down all the 7 traditional planets and talking about how to craft a ritual practice with those planets, all the attributions to the planets, how to craft an altar space, how to craft a relationship with those planets. It's been really fun. We've got another one coming up on Saturday, August the 9th, so I hope that you'll join us for that as well, the last in our series dignity and devotion. We're going to be looking at Saturn and all of the significations of that. If you missed any of them, they are all in the store. So all of those are part of the sale. So all of the previous planetary webinars we did, each one of them is about 4 hours long. So they're packed with information. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that. And it's just a little gift from me to you to say, hey, you know, welcome. And I hope that you are going to be benefiting from the knowledge that we're putting out there today. All right. Speaking of Third Coast Mojo, my beautiful partner has an Etsy account where she is making all sorts of beautiful magical items. Here you can see this beautiful Come To Me oil, which is a great way to facilitate some love in your life. So if you want to support the work that she's doing, it's wonderful stuff. Go over to Etsy and check out Third Coast Mojo. If you want to know when I'm going to be going live and when I'm going to be offering classes or discounts, or when I write articles about the current astrology or esoteric information, the best thing to do is sign up for our newsletter. We have a newsletter where if you click a link in the description of this video or wherever you're consuming this, I'm also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can get a 10% discount on any service that I offer by signing up for the newsletter. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that. And then finally, if you want to support the work that I'm doing here today, you can purchase a super chat while I'm live on YouTube, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com, which is a Patreon type website that supports the work that I do. It helps me to produce this television show every week, and it's a great way to support the channel. So thank you so much for those of you who are able to contribute. All right, friends, I'm going to check back in on the chat. We've got some more friends stopping in. Karen is here. How you doing? Kia ora, Spencer. Karen says 6 a.m. here in New Zealand, and it is cold. Oh my goodness, this is dedication. We have our beautiful international friends, especially joining us from the other side of the world. So kia ora to you, Karen. Thank you so much for waking up early and spending your morning with us. It's a little cooler here today. Not necessarily like the winter time on the other side of the planet, but we're in the high 70s today, which honestly is the coldest that it's been in a while. It's been really hot here lately, and we're getting a little bit of relief lately. So I'm welcoming the cold, but I can understand if it's a little too cold over there. But welcome, my friend. Violet Flame is here. Says hi from sunny Edinburgh in Scotland. Ooh, welcome, friend. And I hope that you're doing well. Thank you for joining us here today. Devin Malone is here. Says hello from the land of Damian Lillard. Oh, I'm so happy for you, Devin, when it comes to Damian Lillard. For those of you who are unfamiliar with basketball in the NBA, Damian Lillard is a basketball player who is a pretty integral part of the Portland Trailblazers and has been for many, many years. A really well-beloved figure in that community and an excellent basketball player. And a few years ago, he was traded to the team that I'm a fan of, the Milwaukee Bucks, and he had an up and down sort of experience. But now he is back in Portland, back in the place. He has returned back to the place of his origin in good Cancerian fashion. He's a Cancer sun, so he's going back to his family, and I'm actually pretty happy for him. So I'm extremely happy for the fans of Portland, because I think it's really nice when a prodigal son, right? A prodigal son returns home. So happy for you, Devin, and welcome, my friend. Sag Moon Magic is here. Hey, Sophie, how you doing? So this is my beautiful daughter, Sophie. Make sure you support her over on her TikTok and her Instagram channel. She's been posting some really informative videos about the tarot and about magic and magical practices. So hope that you all support her over there, and welcome all of you who are joining me from her channel as well. She's been really helping to drive some traffic over to the channel, and I really appreciate that. And really, most of all, I've appreciated just the ability for her and I to connect, learning some of this stuff. We've been having some really in-depth conversations about the tarot, about astrology, about talking about these things in public, and really proud of the effort and the work that she's been doing lately. So love you, Bug, and thanks for joining me today. Tarja is here, says hello from Finland. We finally have a hot summer. Ooh, Tarja, you're getting the heat. Love all my Finnish friends, so thank you again for Tarja for stopping in, and hopefully you're staying cool or enjoying the heat, whichever it is that is the best temperature for you. Candy Corn is here. Hello, Corinne. Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well, and hope that everything's going well on the East Coast of the United States. All right, friends. So thank you so much for being here today. So we're talking about this new moon. So let's dive in. What do you say? So we've got this new moon in the first decan of Leo. And this is 2 degrees of Leo on the 24th of July. And we have some features of this new moon. Okay, we've got a Mercury retrograde. So Mercury, as of this morning, is retrograde and in Leo. And I'll bring the chart up in a second to show you all the details. We have a new moon trining Saturn and Neptune. We'll talk about that. It's sextiling Uranus and Venus. Newly ingressed into Gemini, Uranus is. I have a whole 2-hour breakdown on Uranus and Gemini, if you'd like to check that out. That's a previous live stream that I did last week. The big one, the big elephant in the room for this new moon is an opposition to Pluto in Aquarius. So we will talk about what that entails, because I think that this new moon, if I were to just to think about the big picture thoughts, is there's some feelings of pressure to perform, the tension between visibility and maybe feeling like we might want to fade into the background. Not every spotlight is comfortable. Sometimes it can be a white hot spotlight. Some people enjoy being in that spotlight. Other people is like, oh, I'm feeling like some negative energy is coming my way through that spotlight. So we'll discuss those issues here today. We will talk about also today Jupiter moving through its malefic enclosure. Okay, I'll explain what that means in great depth. We'll talk about Venus moving into Cancer, Mercury's cazimi, the renewal of Mercury in the heart of the sun. We will bring the new moon into its first quarter in Scorpio. And then we'll finish off by talking a little bit about Mars and Libra and how that might affect the upcoming full moon in Aquarius on the 9th of August that has a Mars trine Uranus and a Mars Saturn opposition. So we'll talk not only how the seeds are going to be planted today, but how it's going to be unfolding over time. All right. Devin says, what are the minutes of the conjunction? Well, let's see, Devin. Let's bring the chart up, and then let's see what we've got going on here. So we see our chart here of the new moon in Leo, and we are looking at July the 24th, which is next Thursday, 3:11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So for Devin, that would probably be noon, right? So 12:11 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, I guess, if you do daylight time out there. And this is going to be, here I'm going to circle some important features of this new moon for you. So here we've got the new moon. So we've got it happening in the first 10-degree section of Leo. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the decans, we are going to be breaking down this via each 10-degree section of the zodiac, okay, which further gives us a little bit more information than what we would normally get just from looking at the sign as a 30-degree section. All of the same general themes for Leo apply, but we can see this as a story that's unfolding. And when we have a new moon in the first decan of a sign, we have this initiation energy that's coming in. And the initiation that we're getting in Leo is trying to test out our authenticity, maybe through putting on personas, maybe through mask making, through trying to figure out what type of outer expression is going to match our true inner integrity self. And that's really the definition of integrity to me, is being able to match your outer expression with your inner feelings and your inner self. And it's not always an easy journey. Sometimes we make some mistakes. Sometimes we try to be something that we're not, or sometimes we get in league with friends that are different than us, and we try to change to be what they want us to be or what we think they want us to be. Same thing in romantic relationships. We often can get involved in romantic relationships when we're younger, and sometimes even when we're older. They're not quite right for us because we're forced to be something that we are not comfortable with. And then we come to the realization that the effort to uphold that mask is not worth it. So this is initiating a new cycle related to some of those themes. Now, Mercury stationing retrograde is representative of a review of some sort, maybe something that was given that's taken back, maybe a review of who we really are. Who do we really want to be, especially in Leo, saying who do we really want our public-facing persona to be? What is our authentic self? How do we attempt to gain validation for who we are as well. This is some of the difference between Aries and Leo. I think that oftentimes we think of Aries, a Mars-ruled sign, as saying, I want to be free to be myself. And the Aries, the cliche with Aries, it says, I'm going to be myself, and I don't really care if you like it or not, right? And sometimes through rejecting what you are not through Aries, saying, hey, I'm really not this. I'm going to separate myself from this. I'm going to reject this so that I can be a unique individual. So there's this less attachment to validation. There's less attachment to saying, well, I care what people think, right? Well, in Leo, we have this sort of awakening awareness of an other, even if that other is an audience, right? So we say, hey, we want to be ourselves, but we want to be loved for who we are. We want to be validated for who we are. We don't want to just go off and do our own thing. We want to have an interaction, right? And sometimes that can lead to the types of expression that isn't quite in alignment with our destiny. Sometimes it does. So we'll talk about that journey here today. So with Mercury retrograde here as part of this, co-present with the sun, we might be reviewing how we seek validation. We might be reviewing how we try to craft the victory of authenticity. We might be reviewing who we truly feel we are inside and how that matches up with our external expression. We also have in this new moon, the new moon trine Saturn retrograde and Neptune. So here is Saturn making its overcoming trine. Okay. One interesting thing about the first decan of Leo is that it has a secondary planetary ruler. So Leo is the house of the sun, which means that it is a temple that the sun has stewardship over. Okay, think about it as this grand ancient Greek temple, and the sun is responsible for everything that goes on within that temple. Well, each decan has its own planetary ruler, and in this case, Saturn is the ruler of the first decan of Leo. So we have this Saturnine color, the Saturnine face, or the Saturnine mask on the Leo temple. So what does Saturn represent, and how is it different from the sun? Well, Saturn binds us to responsibilities. It tries to create structures, physical structures. Sometimes it represents duties and responsibilities, things that bring us the concretization of options into one physical thing, like the manifestation of it. It also can feel, when we're combining those influences with the solar energy, like a pressure cooker. This is one kind of a metaphor that T. Susan Chang uses. One of my favorite tarot readers / astrologers, T. Susan Chang. She has a great book called 36 Secrets, and she likes to think of this decan as this pressure cooker, where you feel like, okay, we've got to perform, but we're feeling all this pressure to do so, right? We're feeling all of this, the weight of the responsibilities. Sometimes that can lead to things like stage fright, right? When we're thrust into a new position of visibility, that can be scary for a lot of people because it might be something new that we're not used to. And we can also think of being able to utilize the power of that spotlight positively and negatively. This is what is talked about quite a bit in 36 Faces by Austin Coppock, which is another great book on the decans. He's talking about utilizing attention and being able to direct it or to avoid it. So there may be instances with this new moon where we are trying to utilize attention towards positive means, but we also might be feeling some of the pressure of having to perform, of having to put on a new persona, put on a new mask, play a new role. Think of an actor trying to play a new role that they're uncomfortable with, right? Or that is new to them. Not every actor is right for every role. And sometimes we have to find what type of roles that we're meant to play in life. It's always thinking of life as like this big stage, right? Like thinking of life as this grand play where we're playing out these dramas on this stage of life. And we're all here to play certain roles, and sometimes those roles change. They're not always just one role for an entire lifetime. You might be playing one role when you're young as a son or a daughter. You might be playing a role as a parent as you get older, and then you might be playing a role as a grandparent, or you might be playing the role as a teacher, as a astrologer, as a tarot reader, or whatever it is, whatever role that you're playing out in the world. So those things are fluid. Roles are fluid. And by holding on to one particular role, even past the point of not growing within that role, can be painful. So that might be part of the pressure that we're feeling here too, is what roles are we holding on to out of duty, out of responsibility, out of just force of habit? And how do we grow into our new role in a healthy way? Because oftentimes when we're faced with a new role, it can be overwhelming. We're like, oh, I've always done things a certain way. I've always been this type of person. And now I'm being thrust through circumstance into a new role or into a new experience. And that can be a little bit unsettling at first, especially this week, friends, with Uranus moving signs into Gemini. Uranus is shaking up a new part of our chart. And that's another thing to think about with this, is Uranus is making a sextile to this new moon. So not only do we feel some pressure from Saturn to individuate, being in Aries, and its conjunction with Neptune, maybe we have a little bit of a foggy picture of what that entails. But now here we see here the sextile from Venus and Uranus, and especially from Uranus. It's a very tight sextile, which is a positive relationship, but it is one that is shaking up our idea of who we are and what our persona is. And Uranus has moved into a new area of all of our natal charts. Every single one of us has a natal chart that divides this sky pie, you could say, into 12 different sections. And each of those different sections, called houses, represents a different topic within our life. So we may have been getting shaken up by Uranian energy in the Taurus area or topic of our life. And again, it's going to be different for different people. In this arbitrary chart of the new moon in Leo, Uranus was in the 7th house, but has now moved into the 8th. So for people who are Scorpio risings, for example, they may have gotten a new awareness of freedom or a shakeup of energy in their relationship, 7th house. But now it's moved into their 8th house, which is related to legacies after death. It's associated with resources that you share with a partner. It's associated with contracts like wills and inheritances. So those types of things may be the focal point for Uranian energy. So we're all getting shaken up in that regard on some level. My friend Jody is here. How you doing? Jody says, hi, Spencer. I made it live. Yay, good to see you. Oh, nice to see you, Jody. Hope you're doing well down there in sunny Florida and everything's going well with your puppies and everything like that. So welcome, friend, and it's nice to see you in the chat. Okay, so we're talking about the new moon, sextile Uranus and Venus. Venus, I think, is helping ease some of the transitory energy of Uranus. They ingress almost together with one another. So I think that we're taking on these new roles a little bit more gracefully than we might otherwise. We will see in the next year, we're going to see some ingress of, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The next time that Uranus advances into a new sign, 7-ish years from now, it will be ingressing with Saturn in Cancer. So a very different shakeup, and one that might be a little bit more painful because we have a malefic planet in what is called its exile, a place that it is not necessarily comfortable in. Here we have Venus helping to smooth the transition. So we're looking way far ahead there, but the good news is that our transitions may be well protected by Venus. Now, the challenge with Uranus moving into Gemini, especially the first decan of Gemini, is that we are starting to see the potential for many new options. Uranus is exploding our options and bringing us all sorts of contact with different people, different ideas, different ways of being. And we're trying to all parse it all out in real time. And that can feel a little bit overwhelming. Sometimes what that leads to is the experience that we see in the 8 of Swords, which is a card that shows a figure that is bound, that is tied up, Okay, I'll stop the share for a second. I'll show you that card because this is our Uranian energy that is informing this new moon. Okay, so let me bring that up here for a second. Okay, so here you can see, here's our Eight of Swords card. So a figure that is tied and blindfolded. We might not be able to see clearly all of the endpoints that these new options and new rivers might take us towards, right? But one of the things that is important to remember is that Gemini is an exploratory sign. It is a sign associated with the springtime, with bees that are visiting all sorts of different flowers and collecting pollen. So this might be an important time to just test things out, to visit different ideas, to visit different personas, and to try them on for size without necessarily making a firm, solid commitment to any of them. And that can feel a little bit unsettling, but I think through having an exploratory, experimenting mindset, that can lead us to some of the best possible outcomes. We also have this new moon, and this is kind of the big elephant in the room, opposite Pluto retrograde. And as I'm talking about it, I want you to keep in your mind this card right here. This is the Five of Swords. And here, this is a card associated with the first 10-degree section of Aquarius. And that is where Pluto is traveling through in the moment. Here, this card is called Conflict and Defeat. And we can see a smug winner gathering up swords, gathering resources, while the quote-unquote loser goes off into exile onto the fringe. Now, I don't necessarily think that we are a loser necessarily with this card, but I think that one of the things that is important is the idea of people who are consolidating power and the idea of those that are having to be forced into the fringes of society. And we have seen a lot of attention towards people on these outskirts of society, a feeling of not belonging in the centralized group, the centralized power. And that doesn't mean that the people who hold the power in the central organization are good or ethical. Sometimes we have people that take power that are corrupt. And when we see Pluto in this decan, we sometimes see the exposure of corruption when we try to other people towards our own ends and towards our own desires and narcissistic needs. So one of the tensions that we're going to feel at this new moon is as we try to figure out how to be ourselves, how to be, to gain maybe the spotlight and to utilize it for the good of the whole, hopefully, there's tension, right, between our ability to put ourselves out there and how we might feel uncomfortable as part of a collective that it might be a little bit difficult to find the right place for us. We might feel like an exile, and we might be trying to enter into a centralized organization that doesn't have an opportunity for us to be a part of it. I'm thinking very literally of like the billionaire class versus the working class. You know, if you think that the billionaire class wants people from the working class to ascend to it, well, then you haven't really been paying a lot of attention, because that gap, that wealth gap, that legal gap has become wider and wider over the course of the last few months, years, decades, etc. So trying to enter an already closed club could feel very difficult, especially when we are trying to put on a new persona potentially. So I'll bring the chart back up here. And you can see this very clearly with our new moon at 2 degrees of Leo, opposite Pluto at 2 degrees of Aquarius. I would also anticipate in the collective a lot of discussion between the haves and the have-nots. This is something that has really been coming to the forefront in our news cycles. Just today, this week, there was a bill that was approved by Congress stripping an organization of its funding, like NPR, like PBS, money that was paid for by taxpayer money to be able to provide services for the collective, and sometimes for the rural and the working class, programs like Sesame Street, etc., that were helping kids sometimes in disadvantaged areas learn how to read, learn how to count, And all of those things are coming under attack by a billionaire oligarch class that wants to strip them of those resources. So this tension that we see between those types of things in the collective right now, the corruption of othering. We've seen things in the news cycle about immigration and about the casting into exile of the people that don't belong, quote unquote. All right, where we see people being sent to an internment camp, basically in southern Florida, sometimes without due process and without respect of their human rights. So the corruption of othering, right? The corruption of scapegoating. Another thing to think about with Pluto in this decan is it also has to do, this decan, with schadenfreude, with feeling pleasure in someone else's pain. It can also be associated with jealousy. Sometimes when people ascend to a position of power, what it does is it can bring good attention, positive attention. It also can bring negative attention by people that might feel jealous, that might feel that you're taking power without considering the needs of the collective. All of those things are going to be discussions that are coming up through the collective voices, through the collective consciousness when we see this new moon come to fruition next Thursday. And we're already seeing sort of the foundation being laid for all of this. My friend Kate is here. How you doing, Kate? Nice to see you. Hope everything's going well your way. So that really is kind of the biggest and closest aspect that's being made. I mean, we do have the trine with Neptune here, which is slightly closer, okay? But this is applying to the opposition to Pluto. So it is coming into an arrangement with Pluto. Devin says the Five of Swords was the force worth the cost of victory. Yeah. And so you see that the relationship between those two cards, right? I always like to teach the tarot in regards to opposites. That is one way of looking at the tarot. This is a technique that I talked about in my Stars and Cards webinar, where we talk about opposites within the tarot. So here you see the card associated with the new moon, the first 10-degree section of Leo, Five of Wands, the competition. And then, yes, here, Devin is pointing out the cost of that victory, right? A win for somebody. Like, so for example, the more these types of draconian laws get passed down, there is a lot of crowing from certain individuals within the government about how great of a victory it is. But it also creates all of this collateral damage, and all of the cost of that victory becomes very apparent in the unfolding and the analysis that comes afterwards. So that tension between those two things, the quote-unquote victory in somebody's eyes, which really, when you talk about it in relationship to the collective, is not much of a victory. It's only a victory for a small handful of people. But then also the collateral damage and destruction and corruption that it causes. So something to consider. KWOW says, I've been an NPR sustainer since 2018. They're an important part of my day every day. Absolutely. They're an extremely important source for information that makes every attempt, I think, to be as unbiased as possible. And I think that's the thing that is difficult for the current administration to understand and to accept, is they are going to try to report on what they perceive as the facts. And the current administration doesn't necessarily want to deal with facts. They want to craft the narrative in their own image. And when you have organizations that do that, the people who are trying to further autocratic power are going to strike out against them. And that's, I think, exactly what we're seeing here. You also saw it with the cancellation of a program like The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. I don't know if any of you heard that as well, but they just recently canceled Stephen Colbert's show. And he's been a vocal critic of the president over the last few years, even before he was president. So they're claiming that it's a ratings thing, but that is actually the highest rated late show out of all of the late shows, including Jimmy Kimmel, what's the other guy, Jimmy Fallon, etc. So I think that that's another thing that's happening. And part of the story behind that is right now there is a potential merger from Paramount and CBS with another company, and it needs FCC approval. And because the current administration has control of people in the FCC, they're saying, well, you have to jump through all these hoops before we're going to allow that corporate merger to take place. And as we've seen in the past, there are vindictive actions by the current president where he is lashing out against people that don't agree with him. So in this case, he said, well, we're going to shut down a vocal critic of my policies and of myself before I will allow this corporate merger to take place. And the company CBS Paramount has bent over and acquiesced to that bullying. So really scary times that we're experiencing here. A lot of censorship, a lot of attempts to control the narrative, and a lot of attack on free speech right now. So something that to really keep in mind at this full moon is that these are some of the tensions that are coming out into the collective that we're having to deal with as a community. Kate says something about Mercury retrograde and Leo-Pluto dynamics with Neptune involved reminds me of identification mishaps. Yeah, that could be true, right? Misidentifying things and not understanding the role that it's playing within the collective. Devin says they canceled Colbert the day Mercury stations. Well, there you go, right? Where we see a lot of people in the entertainment industry might be affected by this Mercury retrograde, a taking back of something that had been given. Now, one thing to consider is sometimes when things happen during a Mercury retrograde, they get reversed later. So I would not be completely surprised if there was enough public outcry that they changed their mind on that decision. He's a very popular late night show host and people watch that show. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a reversal that comes after Mercury maybe stations direct potentially. Kate says, like the Coldplay guy calling out the CEO as he was having an affair. I saw that too. Yeah, another example of that, right? Yeah, Kate was talking about misidentification mishaps. We had, if you aren't familiar with this story, a CEO of a company, astronomer, and I'm not exactly even sure what they make, but got caught on camera having an affair with his CPO of the same company. And as they got put on the big screen, they were embracing, and then they were like, forcefully exited each other's arms, very red-faced and embarrassed. So yeah, like that is a perfect example, Kate, of the potential of a spotlight that could reveal a corruption that could feel menacing to those people in that moment. They didn't necessarily want that attention, but it came to them and it revealed a corruption that they were perpetuating on their current spouses. So this might also be a spotlight that is revealing of something that has fallen into corruption as well. Yeah, the mask off, Kate says. Absolutely. Right, because Pluto is not going to abide by a mask. It's going to strip everything down to its bare essentials and try to reform something. From the stage call out. Exactly. Yep. So the stage being a place that felt intimidating to those people, and rightfully so, because they were acting, they were stepping out on their committed relationships. So here we go. So that's our new moon opposite Pluto. Intensity. Okay. The other thing to consider too that we're still experiencing, if I bring our thing back to the stage here, our chart back to the stage, excuse me. We're also experiencing a Jupiter malefic enclosure. And I will break that down again for you here. Basically what that means is that both malefic planets, Mars and Saturn, are casting their aspect ray, which every planet casts aspects rays to different houses or planets. They cast a sextile ray 2 signs away. They cast a trine ray, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 signs away. They cast a square ray 3 signs away, and etc. Opposition, like the opposition that we saw between the Sun and Pluto is the opposition ray. So now Saturn is casting its aspect ray to the square side at 1 degrees of Cancer here. It's casting its light there. Mars is casting its light or ray to 21 degrees of Virgo. And what that does is that's like, think of it like not just like light in this case. I would think with these planets, it's almost like lasers on either side of Jupiter. And if he moves in one direction or the other, he's going to run right into a laser and slice off a finger or something like that. So he feels stuck. He's enclosed by those energies. There's pressure from, and if we think about this and we apply it to our lived lives, experiences, we feel pressure from other parts of our life that is limiting the expansive abundance that we might be wanting to attempt with Jupiter in its exaltation, which means that it's in a place that is very fertile. We have all of the elements that are ready for expansion. But we have certain things that are slowing us down. In this case, we have Saturn in Aries, and conjoining it is Neptune, which oftentimes Saturn talks about the legal system or the laws and the agreements that form the fabric of society. So right now, the laws and the fabric of society that's being crafted is in its fall. It's in a place that is serving only individuals rather than serving the collective in a fair way. So that's one of the pressures that we have that's limiting our ability to expand. We also have Mars in Virgo. And Mars in Virgo is teaching us that we may not necessarily have the skills yet to take on the responsibility of the growth that we are trying to enact. You know, we see this in the story of Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. Well, sometimes when we grow into new roles and we expand, we have to learn new skills. We have to learn new skill sets. We have to learn new systems to support that growth. So here's an example as a gardener. Sometimes when you have a tomato plant, let's say we've got a really healthy tomato plant that is growing and it's starting to grow tomatoes, but the tomatoes are so heavy that it's starting to flop over. And if it flops over and those tomatoes hit the soil, they're much more vulnerable to pests, to diseases, to being stepped on. So we have to learn the skills of how to support those and build the supportive structures that can hold up that tomato plant so that it can ripen to its full potential. And many of us, myself included, are having to learn some new skills right now to be able to expand into the new roles that are being presented to us. We've been talking about this within our family. We've been talking about this in regards to our garden project, in regards to some new facets of our businesses that we're trying to expand. Oftentimes we need to learn new skills to support that. And that's okay. So Jupiter in malefic enclosure says, hey, there's all sorts of great potential, but maybe we need to, first of all, temper our expectations, because the climate of society is in a tight spot right now. Maybe we also need to learn some new skills to support the growth that we are attempting to make. But thankfully that is ending. That malefic enclosure is going to end on the 1st of August. So maybe we'll get some relief from that. Kate says, with Leo, I think of literal images. Pluto is like an X-ray. I wonder what photos will be like around this time. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what comes out into the collective and what is revealed from the underworld, what erupts like Hades erupted from the underworld to abduct Persephone back into his realm. Sometimes Pluto energy is like a volcano that erupts, you know, that something that has been repressed for a long time. There's been a lot of talk about some of the challenges of the people in power and the Epstein files and things of that nature. So that probably is a good example of Pluto revealing corruption and having it have a direct effect on people who are in positions of power and positions of privilege. So we'll see what happens with that too. Oftentimes Pluto says you're not going to be able to repress something forever. Like it's going to erupt in a way that is volcanic and explosive. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you and bring up to the stage a slide from my Decans of Leo webinar. And I want to show you just the progression of Leo, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the first decan of Leo. Before I do so, do me a huge favor, friends. If you are new here, or if you're not, or if you're here, just go over and like the video if you can. Take a little stretch, get a drink of water, If you are new here, please welcome and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you want to support the work I'm doing, you can buy a super chat while I'm live, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com or sign up for a reading. I would love to interact with more of you on a personal level. And I've also got a whole bunch of webinars on sale right now, 20% off. Use the code SAGMOONMAGIC. Okay, so here's our Leo story that we're seeing unfolding over the course of the 5, 6, and 7 of the tarot. So as we've been discussing today, we have the 5 of Wands, which shows a mock battle, a competition, a vying for the spotlight, a vying for the authentic expression. As we move towards the second decan of Leo, we see a victory, the victor, right? The Lord of Victory is what that card is called. And then as we move forward in the story, we see someone who is defending a position of power, defending a position of victory, right? Against someone who would want to usurp them. There are succession stories that come with becoming powerful. We can see that succession story with the story of Kronos and Zeus, right? Kronos, Saturn, was Zeus's father and consumed all of his siblings. And eventually Zeus, being hidden away from his brothers and sisters, came back and liberated them and brought us victory. So here we even see this in the Decanic story here. We have Saturn in the first decan, Kronos, consuming his children. Here we have Zeus victorious in liberating them. Then eventually, and I'm not sure where that little icon went, but we have the Mars-ruled decan here trying to defend a position that we've attained. So this is an interesting way of seeing this and how it's unfolding. And if we do understand that, we can understand what this new moon is asking for from us. It is the feeling of vying for competition, for attention. Here's a little list of themes. So this card is called the Lord of Strife, the Lord in Book T and the Book of Thoth. Austin Coppock calls it the Spotlight. I believe T. Susie Chang calls it the pressure cooker. Okay, and we've got a spirit in this decan called Hephaestus. Hephaestus was the Greek god of the forge. Right, he had this hammer and his anvil, and through a lot of hard, dirty work, he was able to craft these beautiful like weapons, armor, all of these things that showed off great craftsmanship. So the pressure of the forge, the pressure of the hammer and the anvil, is something that we see within this decan. Though we're being pushed to be forged in the fire on sub level, whether we're ready or not. So themes include mock battles, athletic contests. I often see in an Olympic year, this is usually when the Olympics start. So a very literal representation of this is like when you see people coming from all over the world to compete. We have a Sephira in the Kabbalistic tree of life called Gevura. Gevura in Atziluth is the pressure to strive. This is a Mars-ruled Sephiroth in the Kabbalistic tree. So we're feeling maybe this aggression in this decan on some level. Spotlight, stages, and role-playing. We've talked about that on how we're trying to take on a role in a search for authenticity. This can also lead to things like performance anxiety and stage fright. Sometimes taking on more visibility can be really anxiety-producing. Masks and crafting a persona. I think a good animal for this, and it's not our animal of the week, but it is a one that I think can be really helpful with this decan, is the raccoon. You know, the raccoon literally wears a mask on its face, and being able to try out a new persona maybe through the safety of having a little bit part of ourselves protected can be help us to alleviate some of that anxiety. So we don't necessarily have to reveal every single part of ourselves when we're trying on a new role of visibility. Sometimes we can keep some things hidden, and sometimes there's some just strategic value in doing so. Learning to master appearances and direct attention, right? Saying, hey, you know, maybe we want to focus on this part of our persona, but we don't want to reveal this other part that's not ready for public consumption yet. So questions to meditate and reflect and ask yourself during this new moon. Where are you feeling pressure to perform? What area of life are you feeling the pressure cooker and the heat starting to rise underneath you? What role are you being asked to play? Sometimes the roles that we play need changing. This is what sometimes what Pluto and Uranus are coming in to do, like to change some of the roles, to keep us moving forward in growth, right? Growth cycles. Is your outer persona in alignment with your inner truth? Always important to reflect on that. This type of society that we live in today is constantly pushing us to do more, unlimited growth. The measure of success is rising numbers. And that's not necessarily how nature works. Okay, so sometimes we have periods of growth, sometimes we have periods of abundance, and sometimes we have periods of decay and of being able to let go to regenerate the land. So where are you in that cycle? Do you need to rest, right? How do you incorporate rest into that? How do you let the land regenerate? Like, for example, when I do my live streams, I am giving out a lot of information and a lot of energy, but I need to recharge that battery in between. This is why I don't go live every day. Like, I do it once a week because I need to recharge that battery. I need to study so that I'm refilling the well and staying a little bit more idle so that I can actually refill my energy and my information base so that I'm not just regurgitating the same thing over and over again. It is a cycle of breathing, of exhaling and inhaling, right? So how do you work with those cycles rather than falling into the false ideal, the Babylonian tower of unlimited growth and having to do something at every moment of the day? Sometimes it's okay to just be. And it's really difficult in a society like this that is forcing us to do even more and more just to scrape by, right? Is it time to step into the spotlight or to seek refuge? And there's no wrong answer to that, right? Sometimes we feel like, oh, we have to force ourselves into visibility. There are times in life where it's just not the right time. And through doing so, we're actually being counterproductive to the mission of our higher selves and the mission of our soul. What ambition has been ignited? The transition from Cancer to Leo and the cards of Cancer to the cards of Leo are really interesting. The last card in Cancer is the Four of Cups. And in the Four of Cups, we see someone who is refusing an extra cup from the hand of the divine. He already has 3 cups. He's already satisfied. He's had too much. And you can think of Cancer related to the moon as being related to the physical world, to the body. When we get our physical needs met, when we get our enough food, enough sleep, when we have a stable place to live, when we try to add more and more and more physical things, we can come to the point of diminishing returns. And that transition to Leo is the beginning of a search for, I think, maybe a higher purpose, maybe a putting meaning into our lives that is beyond just getting our physical needs met. So ambition comes along with that sometimes. How can you learn to direct and focus your will? It's another thing that's often associated with Leo, is being able to become involved in the present moment. If we think sometimes as Aquarius and Saturn as an objective, distant viewer, like from maybe a 30,000-foot view, the Leo energy is being right in the heart of something. You know, the sun is sort of the heart of the 7 Chaldean planet order. And we are focusing on becoming present, getting involved, asserting our own will. There's often times when we can be too assertive, and that leads to a downfall through our own hubris. But there are other times when we do need to get involved, when there's somebody that needs our help, when there's somebody vulnerable that needs help. And if we just continue to stand by the sideline and not get involved, more suffering can be perpetuated than if we actually acted and got involved. So things to consider with Leo 1 here. All right, so I'm going to go back to the chat and let's see. We've got a few comments coming in. Kate says, I like that perspective, Spencer. Thank you, Kate. Kate says, it's hard to feel perfect enough sometimes. Yeah, it is. I hear you. There's a lot of pressure that gets put on us from not only our society, but from our families, from our parents, from our partners, from our kids. And we're always trying to live up to some kind of ideal that we have crafted of who we should be. Now, the good news is that you have control over what image is your personal ideal, right? Isn't that interesting how we take that power back? when we understand that the standards that we set, yes, they are influenced by external factors, but oftentimes we are our own worst, accountability partner as far as what we're trying to be. And you can always change your mind about who you are, what you're aspiring to be. And you can make peace with it, I guess, on some level. And that is very affirming and very powerful to know that at any point you can say, you know what, I just don't, that's not a standard I'm trying to uphold anymore. This is my standard now. This is who I want to be. I'm allowed to change. Stephen, the Jupiterian, is here. Hey, Stephen, how you doing, bud? Nice to see you. Kate says to be a good friend, a good partner, a good parent, a good student. Yeah, it is hard, and sometimes those roles are going to change. We can be the best friend in the world, but if our friend isn't reciprocating that energy, that friendship might have to change. We can have a great relationship with a friend for a long period of time, and then their values might start going in a different direction than our values, and then we have to make adjustments. That's just life. That's just change, right? Stephen says, Mercury and Leo, taking off the mask. Absolutely. Stephen says, I broke the mold. I'm in control of my own life now. Well, that's awesome, Stephen. I'm glad that that's working out for you. All right. Kate says, sometimes the images don't match what you see versus what others see, exterior versus interior. Absolutely. And that is what can feel very difficult, especially if you have a malefic planet in this decan. If you have Saturn or Mars in the first decan of Leo, oftentimes the public face that you present to the world is very different than what you feel on the inside. And the hard work, the painful work, is trying to marry those two together and make them match a little bit more, right? It might be pretty easy if you have Jupiter in this decan or Venus. It might be easy to craft that authenticity, or easier, I guess you could say. Okay, a couple more things. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start unfolding the week ahead and the couple weeks after the new moon. So let's go back to our stage here. And what we're going to do is we are going to unfold this in a timeline. So the first thing that happens right after the new moon is the opposition to Pluto. So let's do this. Let's make a transit chart here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how this is going to unfold. We're going to keep the new moon on the inner wheel. And then we're going to show you how the planets are going to move in relationship to that new moon chart on the outside wheel. So you can see the day after, the sun is going to perfect that opposition to Pluto on the 25th. All right. So we've talked about this a little bit already, but Sun-Pluto oppositions oftentimes show a corruption of or use of power and authority. So one of the things that I'm nervous about with this new moon is the people in power right now, especially the current president of the United States, is facing a lot of pressure due to his actions in the past. And he is receiving a lot of attention that he does not want to deal with. And every time that he has faced criticism in the past, he ends up creating a violent distraction. So this is something I'm nervous about with this new moon, is because we have a very flawed, mentally unwell person being cornered, who has an enormous amount of power. What kind of thing is he going to create to distract away from his own indiscretions? I don't know. It's happened a number of times already, and it should be something that should be on our radar as we move forward. Let's see. So the other thing I will say with Sun-Pluto oppositions, I remember this very distinctly in, I believe it was the summer of 2020 or somewhere around that period of time. There was a Pluto Sun opposition from Cancer to Capricorn. And that was the summer that we saw people being abducted into unmarked vehicles in places like Portland. This was after the George Floyd protests. And this is often something I see with Sun Pluto hard aspects, the abduction quality, right? In the myth of Hades, he erupts from the underworld as king of the underworld and abducts the youthful maiden Persephone. And this is something that we are dealing with and grappling with some of the news on the Epstein files, etc. Is literally the abduction and human trafficking of young people for the pleasures of the elite, right? So these things are going to start to be dealt with at this particular point in time. But we may see this play out in a different way as well. There may be other types of abductions where astrology plays out very literally much of the time. So in that case of that Portland example, we saw abductions that were happening of protesters on the streets. So if we have another protest situation, that would be fair warning to be very careful about, being, protecting yourself in those situations. Let's see. Kate says, I'm a Leo rising, Sun in Aquarius. I have a whole complex with this crap. You and me both, Kate. I'm a Leo rising with the North Node in Leo and the South Node in Aquarius. So I understand completely. Try having a moon on the midheaven ruling your 12th house. So oftentimes my instincts are to be hidden away from the world. But it seems, for whatever reason, fate or fortune is thrusting me in front of a very public place to reveal some of my feelings on things, whether I like it or not. And sometimes we just have to grow into those roles and figure out what we're here to do within that sphere of attention. Kate says, Sun Pluto on this axis has a long time to expose. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's our Sun Pluto opposition. Potential for pressure to be put on people who have power. Of course, the sun in traditional astrology was associated with royalty, with kings. So having the pressure of the collective, of the observation of their things that they would prefer to keep hidden is an important part of this new moon. We then see the first aspect on the 26th of July. And this first aspect comes with the moon at 24 degrees of Leo. Okay. So what this means is that we are seeing the first aspect the moon makes after it is released from what is called the bond. So when the moon comes into conjunction with the sun or is opposing the sun, the ancients believed that the manifesting power of the moon was sort of held in check for a period of time. And that period of time was measured within the visibility of that moon being hidden, right, within the sun. And when the moon starts to become visible again, usually around 15 degrees arc of separation, then it's said to be released from the bond. And then the first planet it aspects often gives us sort of the flavor of how this cycle is going to unfold. So in this case, you could see the moon at 24 Leo is making a sextile to Venus at 24 degrees of Gemini. So generally when we have a positive aspect, a sextile or a trine, and we also have a benefic planet like Venus or Jupiter as the first aspect, there can be positive things that can come from this, or at least ones that subjectively feel positive. In this case, we are seeing the moon in the decan associated with the Seven of Wands that we looked at earlier, which is defending a sense of position that had already been attained. And then Venus in the third decan of Gemini says, hey, you might find some good fortune from releasing one option that you've been trying to keep afloat for a long period of time. So I would say the best way to deal with this energy is in the unfolding of it is to maintain a sense of empowerment, to defend your authenticity. You may need to let go of one of the masks that you're wearing. You may need to let go of one of the roles that you feel like you've had to be forced to play, because you're not going to be able to continue on with both of those roles at the same time. One of the roles has to be sacrificed, like one of the twins, Castor and Pollux, in that story that we see reflected in the 10 of Swords, which is the card associated with Venus in the third decan of Gemini. All right. So the next part of this unfolding story, this narrative, is we see Venus moving into Cancer. So here we have our lesser benefic, the benefic of the night sect, moving into, is it the 31st? Oh, well, I thought it was the 30th. And then maybe it's the very last hours of the 30th. Yeah, there you go. So 11:56 p.m. Venus moves into Cancer, Eastern Daylight Time. So this is a shift of our desires. This is a shift of how we create consensus, of how we harmonize, of what we might feel more attracted to during this period. When Venus is in Gemini, we might feel more attracted to exploring our options. We might be more attracted to communicating with vast amounts of people. When Venus moves into Cancer, we've had to make a choice about what we want to infuse our energy into. We've had to let go of some of those other options, and we say, hey, this is what I love. All right, maybe it's one thing that we want to nurture. Venus has extra dignity in the first decan of Cancer. Venus is the ruler of that decan, and you can see that reflected in the Two of Cups, where you see this exchange of energy between two lovers or two people or two partners. So we may feel more of an attraction to work with one-on-one relationships with Venus moves into Cancer. We might be more attracted to slowing down a little bit. Venus in Gemini is very quick. Everything is happening all the time. There's too many things happening. Venus in Cancer says, well, maybe we should slow down a little bit. Maybe we should retreat to our safe spaces. And maybe that safe space is one individual rather than a larger group of people. Okay, so that's Venus in Cancer. Now, the next thing we have on our unfolding, and I go into these things in greater depth in the Astrology of July, if you want to go back and review that in this Mercury retrograde period. But here on the 31st, we have Mercury being renewed in the heart of the sun. Okay, I'm going to go back a few hours here. This is happening around 9 degrees. There it is, right there. There's Mercury Cazimi, July the 31st, which is a Thursday. And that is when Mercury is conjoining the sun. Now, when Mercury is retrograde, as it is right now, and when it goes under the beams of the sun, which is happening on the 22nd of July, Hermes, or Mercury, is considered to be in its psychopomp phase. Now, psychopomp is a fancy word for guide of souls to the underworld. Okay, so it is guiding recently deceased spirits into the underworld. Now, the way that we can apply that to our lives, take that metaphor and apply it to our lives. I have a feeling when Mercury or any planet goes Cazimi, but mostly Mercury is as far as the journeying into the underworld. Mercury is mining our own memory, consciousness, and past, and intuition for some kind of renewal, right? When Mercury is direct, a good friend of mine, Gary Caton, says that Hermes is visiting Olympus. He's looking outside of himself to the gods, to the divine, for information, for a divine download. But when it's retrograde and under the beams, we might be looking within. We might be really asking ourselves, what role do we feel comfortable playing? And maybe one of the things that is really important to do with this new moon is to review times in the past when you have felt pressure to perform or to put on a mask or to put on a persona that it was right for you or wasn't right for you. And what led to those decisions and situations? How did you react at that time? Did it work out well? Did it not? And this moment might be a moment of clarity that says, you know what? This is how I want to utilize my attention, my spotlight, etc. This is the role that I want to play. right? And it might be informed by your past. So something to consider as we move into July 31st, we're going to have Mercury cazimi around that period of time. Venus will be moved into Cancer, and that is going to bring us simultaneously on that same week to a first quarter moon, and subsequently the release of the malefic enclosure of Jupiter. So here is the first quarter moon, the unfolding of this. Now, we'll talk about these in a couple different contexts. So here is the first quarter moon coming right off of a Mercury cazimi. So this is a tension point of trying to bring some kind of new experience into existence. When we have new moons, what we're doing is we're planting a seed. At this new moon, you're planting the seed of mask wearing, of vying for attention, of utilizing the spotlight and directing it in means that feel good and authentic for us. When we get to this first quarter moon, we have some kind of crisis point of bringing that into existence. I would say oftentimes I see with the first quarter, well, not just with the first quarter, but with the moon in the first decan of Scorpio, the collective often has some grief around this period of time. The card associated with the first decan of Scorpio is the Five of Cups, where you see a figure mourning the loss of three spilled cups with two cups still standing behind him. So there may be something that leads to a sense of grief, a sense of loss. Maybe it's even in our own lives when we realize that the mask that we were wearing is not reflective of our true inner self. And we have to mourn the loss of the role that we thought we were playing. It could also be that there's some challenging things that happen, maybe directly related to another distraction from those people in power as they try to distract away from their own corruption and kleptocracy and wealth grabs. That's a possibility as well. And I don't welcome those things. Those things are really difficult to deal with. But being able to learn from history and prepare ourselves emotionally for some of these things, I think, is really important. And to push back on the powers that be when they attempt to do that, and to see through those attempts at distraction and stay focused on the true issues and hold people in power to accountability. So that's our first quarter moon, right? This is on the 1st of August. So there's our first quarter moon, 9 degrees of Scorpio on August 1st. Now, the other thing that's happening on August 1st is the end of our malefic enclosure of Jupiter. So here is how this works. So now, once Venus squares Saturn, okay? So here is Venus now at 1 degree, okay? And it's squaring Saturn at 1 degree of Aries. What it's doing now is Venus is interceding in between the ray of Mars and the ray of Saturn. So it's moving in between. Eventually, once Venus squares exactly, it's not doing it exactly in this chart yet, but it will be that day. Venus is now coming almost to the rescue of Jupiter. So the ability to embrace the sacred feminine, the ability to work through a nurturing, kind existence could help unleash some of the tension that we feel and the pressure from our collective, narcissism that we see with Saturn and Aries. But it's not going to be an easy transition. When we have a Venus-Saturn challenge, Saturn's in the overcoming position in this chart, which means that the pressure that we feel is going to be very real. The pressure of a selfish, focused society is going to put pressure on our domestic lives. It's going to put pressure on our one-on-one relationships. But I think that we need to lean on those to help expand us into a higher consciousness, to expand us into a more balanced way of living within the world and within nature. Okay, Lachesis is here. Ooh, I love that. Lachesis is one of the arbiters of fate. I believe Lachesis was the one that had the scissors that cut the string of fate, one of the three Moirai. I might be misremembering which one Lachesis is, but cool name. It says natal south node at 24 degrees Leo, emphasis on release. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely south node speaks to a place of decrease and release and coming to terms with old karmic experiences and whatnot. So yeah, this one might be a really powerful new moon for release for you in your personal chart as well there, Lachesis. Steven says, I still wear a mask when I go to the grocery store or any public indoor space. I don't wear a mask outdoors. Yeah, like, so you can wear a physical mask too, like that's what Steven's referring to. We're talking about metaphorical masks here. Sometimes when we put on a different persona than we would normally feel, but I'm still with you, Stephen. I'm still an indoor mask person, and I don't necessarily wear a mask outdoors if the airflow is right, but I'm still being very cautious about making sure that I'm not spreading around disease and things of that nature. So there are still those of us out there, Stephen, so I'm with you, my friend. Okay, so that's the end of our Jupiter malefic enclosure. And that is really good news, because that not only relieves the pressure that we're feeling to our Cancerian house and topic, it also is helping us to feel a little bit of relief in the Pisces topic and in the Sagittarius topic of our life, because Jupiter is the planet that was providing resources to those different houses from Cancer. So you might feel some relief when it comes to not only the Cancer part, but also the Piscean and the Sagittarian part. So like, here's an example. In this very arbitrary Scorpio ascending chart, we have Jupiter in the ninth trying to expand our ability to find meaning in life. And it may be putting pressure on our finances with the malefic enclosure and our creativity, or on our children. A very practical example of this, one that's less metaphorical, is like, let's say we had a child that was trying to go to college, and we were waiting for some funds to come in to help that pay their way through school. And the money finally comes in, right? And it alleviates the pressure that we were feeling to try to fund their higher education. Jupiter in the ninth house, ruling the fifth and the second, money and children. You see how we're contextualizing all of that? And there may have been pressure from our community with Mars here, and pressure from the work that we were trying to do to get that money, etc. Now, there may be someone literally out there having that experience right now, but that's an example of how you can contextualize all of these and then take those topic rulers and make a story out of it that reflects our lived experience. Okay, so let's take a look at the last little unfolding before the full moon. So the next kind of event in the unfolding of this leading up to the full moon in Aquarius is Mars moving into Libra. So here is the 6th of August, and it's going to be moving into Libra later on in the day. And this is a little bit challenging. Mars has been having a little bit of a go recently because Mars has been conjoining the South Node. We've been having to release some things associated with our Virgo house that has also affected our Aries and our Scorpio houses and the topics associated with them. Now, Mars is going to move away from the South Node, but it's going to move into its exile in Libra. And once it moves into Libra, it's going to oppose Saturn and Neptune. See that? That doesn't look super fun. Okay. So Mars moves into Libra on the 6th. We may see a lot of anger about somebody getting away with a crime. There is a spirit in the first decan of Libra called the Uranus, and they were these hideous monsters that people prayed to in antiquity to punish somebody who had gotten away with a crime. So you might see a lot of righteous indignation erupting from the collective around this period of time when Mars moves into Libra. Now, when we see the 8th here, it's going to move into that opposition, okay, at 1 degree. I'm not going to move it because I'll lose my little things here. Screw it. So we'll move it to get into the opposition on the 8th. So there's the opposition when Mars is at 1 degree Libra and Saturn and Neptune are at 1 degree of Aries. So Mars-Saturn oppositions are difficult, or can be difficult. They're both malefic planets. They both sometimes bring us experiences that are unpleasant as human beings. Doesn't mean that they're not good for our long-term growth, but they're not always fun, right? Mars sometimes brings us severing and separations. Saturn sometimes brings us denials, exiles, endings. Mars is a planet that likes to move somewhat hastily, although in Libra, oftentimes we are waiting for permission from some external person or force to take action. And Saturn generally is, because of its exaltation in Libra, may be more comfortable taking other people's needs into account, but here is in its fall in Aries. This is often a feeling, a Mars-Saturn opposition, of having one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake, right? And having to like reconcile those two very different feelings, right? The only thing that I could say that is interesting about this in a positive way is they do have something called mutual reception. So Mars is hanging out in the exaltation of Saturn, and Saturn is hanging out in the domicile of Mars. So they are in one of each other's houses. So there may be a way for them to work together, even though they are in opposition, through maybe some secret channels on some level. But I think that the real challenge of this opposition is feeling a sense of injustice, feeling a sense of disempowerment of our individual will, feeling the needs of an other superseding the needs of the self. Now, the good news is that we do have a Uranus trine here. So here's Uranus. We've always got to have a turnaround, right? Things are kind of intense lately, so we have to make sure that we're bringing it back around. So Uranus is going to be trining Mars, and this is going to be maybe shocking us into a new experience of dualities, of new communication styles, of a new awareness of a lack of fairness, a lack of harmony. And that in turn might lead to the type of change that we need to begin the process of rebalancing something. Oftentimes we can't always contextualize a negative event within its greater narrative story. We just experience the negative event first, and then we suffer, and then later, once we experience the entire story unfolding, we understand why the initial negative experience happened. But when we're going through it in the moment, it can be painful. So my advice for you on this is let the entire process and story unfold. You may want justice. You may see injustice and imbalance, but Saturn may be preventing the resolution of that at this moment. But that doesn't mean that that's going to happen forever. That there may be more chapters of the narrative to unfold, especially when we have a difficult placement like this, right? And that's going to lead us to this full moon in Aquarius that you see. So that Mars-Saturn opposition is going to be an enormous part of the full moon. But here is the full moon of this new moon cycle. And this is happening at 16 degrees Leo and 16 degrees of Aquarius. So those decans are associated with the victory of authenticity in the second decan of Leo, represented by the Six of Wands, and also moving from one situation and one shore to another in the Six of Swords, where the moon is going to be in this full moon. So we may see the victory of authenticity that leads to moving on from a situation where we feel stuck, right? Maybe this is really helping to alleviate that feeling of stuckness that we were experiencing with Jupiter and malefic enclosure. And by the time this full moon rolls around, look at where Venus is going to be. Venus is going to be right on top of the place that Jupiter was when it was in the malefic enclosure at the new moon. So harmonizing and softening that potentially. So I do think that we will eventually move on from that feeling of either frustration, that feeling of feeling enclosed, that feeling of injustice and unfairness. We might be forced to move on some level from that experience, to have a communication between the exiled and the people in power. That's another signification of the second decan of Aquarius, is harmonious, or at least the beginnings of communication between those on the fringe and those in the centralized position. So the events of the new moon in Leo will expose potential corruption and potentially have to lead to a negotiation or a renegotiation with Mercury retrograde between the people in the position of power and those that have been exiled to the fringes. So we will do an entire live stream on the full moon in Aquarius too, but those are some of the things to keep your eye on that this is going to be unfolding into. And in your own life, you may be feeling like you are feeling the pressure to perform. You are feeling maybe a little bit of fear around becoming exposed with the opposition with Pluto. But eventually this lunation cycle will lead to a transition from one type of situation that you're experiencing now towards greater authenticity, moving away from a mask that didn't suit you and moving more towards a persona that is integrated with who you really are. And that, to me, is a great, great victory, is becoming a more authentic self, being able to express who you really are without fear of disapproval, without even necessarily caring what other people think. That's the real authentic moment, is when you can just be allowed to be yourself without fear of retribution, without fear of judgment, without the need for approval. Just because we're living an authentic life doesn't mean people are going to like it. This is my advice to every Leo and Leo rising, Leo moon, etc. Just because you're being yourself doesn't mean people have to like it. And the sooner that you release the attachment to the validation, the sooner you're going to be liberated and you're going to be free to just be yourself without needing to change for anyone. So that's the greatest gift, I think, of going through these Leo processes, is the release of any attachment to the parade, the applause, so that you can actually just live your life in peace, I guess you could say. Kate says, Mars likes to bleed, Saturn to clot. So if you need a tourniquet, this could be helpful. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I hope none of you need a literal tourniquet, but that is good advice. Steven says, both are in fall, right? Well, Saturn is in its fall. Mars is in its exile. So similar debilitations, but slightly different nuance. Kate says, this reception and opposition occurs between now and 2027. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's going to be some wild times, friend. 2025 and 2027. Sorry if words implied differently. Yeah, we're going through some challenging times. I mean, that's really just the reality of it. We're going through some difficult political times. We've seen some very challenging new organizations of society. We're seeing a lot of people being cast into exile without due process. We're seeing the cutting of funding that helps the average working class citizen and going straight into the pockets of the oligarch billionaire class. And those things are very challenging, and they make everyday life a little bit more difficult. and in a time period where we have collective actions that need to be made to, combat things like climate change, to deal with global pandemics, to start to build towards a sustainable future. Those types of things make it much more difficult to focus on the real problems that face us as a collective. So hopefully we can survive these times and refocus on how we come together as communities to focus on the real threats that face all of us rather than just the few. So I think those are things to consider as we move through this new moon. So as we come to the end of our broadcast here, thank you so much for hanging out. Do me a huge favor, like and subscribe. What I'd like to do is I have an I-Ching and an animal for you. The I-Ching that I have for you is number 54, which translates to subordination, changing to hexagram number 51, also known as shock. So I'm going to read you a little bit of reference from one of my favorite I-Ching books. It's by Jack Balkin. It's called The Laws of Change. Subordination also translates to the marrying maiden, playing a subordinate role. Subordination, keeping in the background. Just a little background on the I-Ching is it was based on many of the anecdotes in the literature were based on the organization of ancient Chinese civilization, which was very hierarchical and structured and patriarchal. Okay, we have a little bit of a different viewpoint of that moving forward, hopefully. But this talks about playing the role of a secondary wife in ancient Chinese culture. You're not the first wife. You're not the most important. You're not in the most important role. You're in a secondary role. Okay, so I know we have a different organization of society today, so I want you to keep that in mind. But here is what Jack Balkin says. The marrying maiden, to set forth brings misfortune. There is nothing for which this is beneficial. It's the judgment. He goes on to say, under the current circumstances, you must play a subordinate role. Your contributions are not being fully recognized and your worth is not fully appreciated. However, for the moment, there is nothing that you can do about this. If you try to assert yourself, people will regard it as inappropriate. You will either be rebuffed or ignored. The text compares your situation to that of a secondary wife in a family in ancient China. The secondary wife had to behave with caution and circumspection. She could not shine too much, lest she incur the wrath of the first wife. She had to be demure and self-sacrificing in order to preserve order and harmony within the family. Her position was very difficult and required the utmost tact and reserve. But if she behaved with suitable discretion, she could find a place of peace and dignity within the household. The best strategy right now is to be flexible and adaptable. You are not going to be able to receive very much recognition for your efforts, so you should be sensible. If your expectations are too unrealistic, then you will only make yourself unhappy. Don't be angry and resentful. Life is not always fair. Accept the situation for the time being. Stay out of the limelight and don't draw attention to yourself. Perform your assigned role without show or ceremony. Instead of bemoaning your fate, consider how you can be of service and make a contribution. So this is interesting because this is saying that we might be experiencing a little bit of a painful experience of not necessarily being in the role that we want to be in. We're in the subordinate role. And for example, as somebody who is supportive of equal rights, as somebody who is supportive of the working class, we might not be in the position of power right now that we want to be in. We may have to play a little bit of subordinate role. That may be true also when we're trying to gain attention for these things. Like when you have forces like autocratic societies trying to oppress and control the national narrative in the media, you have to be a little bit, sometimes you have to be cagey about how you express yourself. Now, I don't know if we're necessarily doing that here today, but as we move forward into and descend maybe further into autocracy, like fascism, whatever you want to call it, it may become more dangerous to speak out like this. And there may be more forces of control and more forces of censorship that come in. But it may be temporary, I think is what this hexagram is talking about. There is a changing line. It says a one-eyed person is able to see. The perseverance of a solitary person is beneficial. Jack Balkin goes on to say, a one-eyed person has been injured or blinded, but is still able to carry on. The perseverance of a solitary person means sticking with your beliefs even if others have abandoned you. Things have not turned out how you hoped they would, but it is important not to let disappointments undermine your ability to cope with life. Do not become bitter or angry at the world. Do not forsake your convictions. You must continue to have faith in yourself and in your original vision. Remain committed to what you believe is true and right. It is up to you now to carry on, even if you do have to do so alone. Devotion to your principles will ultimately bring you success. Now that's important. This is telling us that, hey, maybe things haven't worked out either in our personal lives or in the collective exactly as we hoped. But we have to stay true to our principles. One of the ways that the I-Ching talks about how to behave within times of oppression is related to a hexagram that talks about this Prince Ji, I believe is how you pronounce it. If I'm butchering it, I apologize. But there was the last ethical person was like the uncle of the corrupt prince that became king during one of the regimes of ancient Chinese culture. And the uncle had to feign madness. He had to feign drunkenness and madness like the people in the court that were partying and going off and just doing all sorts of crazy things. He had to fake being in alignment with them while still staying true to his integrity and to his principles. And there may be a situation that comes up during this new moon where we may have to feign agreement or feign something like madness. But in the background, we are staying true to our ethical actions and self. We may have to do some behind the scenes shadow work in that regard. And that's sometimes the way we have to operate when the people in position of power are not of high character or moral fiber and are seeking to exile those that they disagree with. Sometimes it's a survival mechanism. Now this is changing to the hexagram number 51, which is called shock. It also translates to thunder, shake, quake, upheaval, the arousal, reassessing your life, shocking you out of lethargy, hidden potential and sudden change, blessings in disguise, taking action. Before we break that down, think about things that aren't necessarily so macro in our lives. Think about like a position where, let's say that you are part of an organization, a business, and you aren't necessarily the CEO, but you're in like a middle position, whatever that may be. You may have circumstances in your life that don't allow you to have a direct confrontation with the boss of the company. You may have a sick child at home where you can't afford to lose your job. You can't afford to go through that upheaval. So you may not agree with everything that the company is doing, but you don't necessarily have to go along with everything that they're trying to do that may be corrupt. You can pretend to be compliant while still kind of working in your own ethical way behind the scenes, because you're doing it in service of something greater than yourself. That to me is like kind of playing a role until you can actually make the change that you want to make. And that to me is what this hexagram is speaking towards, is we may find ourselves stuck in positions and roles that we don't necessarily feel 100% comfortable in, but because we serve something greater and much more long-term, we may have to put on the mask, but then still stay true to our ideals without complying to the horrors that we're seeing. Now, that is difficult to do sometimes. There is a lot of nuance in that. How do we continue to make change behind the scenes while not putting ourselves in harm's way or putting others that we care about in harm's way? It's a hard question, and it is something to really consider as we move forward into more turbulent times. I don't know the exact answer to that, but hopefully as a collective we can continue to find the answer. So shock is interesting. Shock is sort of similar to the Tower card. I had been talking with my beautiful daughter about the Tower card today a little bit, and we were talking about what is the benefit of shock, right? When we pull the Tower card, what can that mean in a positive way? Because it looks like a scary card at first, but some of the associations with the Tower card are the Tower of Babel, where we're trying to build a tower to heaven through material means, where we are, through our hubris, trying to reach for something with means that are completely inappropriate towards meeting that specific goal. In that specific example, it's trying to reach the divine through building a material edifice, right? And you could see in that card a lightning strike just completely obliterating that false idea, that false ideal. And the same thing happens with shock. Sometimes what shock will do is it will wake us up from a sleep, from a lethargy, from a false ideal. And at first it can feel very scary, but afterwards it actually brings us closer to our true purpose and our true divine spirit. Oftentimes when you get the Tower card, the shock will be removing something that isn't appropriate for you. But in turn, it moves you closer to the thing that will actually make you happy, that is more in alignment with your integrity. Oftentimes what shock will do too is and what the Tower card does is it will isolate us for a period of time. Sometimes we will need to go through a period of isolation so that we can hear the voice of the divine and not be distracted by some of the negativity that surrounds us. An example could be like removing a negative influence, like a relationship, taking that away. If you've prayed for something in your life, like to bring love into your life, sometimes it may take away a relationship that isn't bringing you happiness, so that you can be open for the new relationship or the new self-love that helps you to appreciate not only an other but yourself. So those types of events can be shocking, but often it leads to a much more grounded, centered, and closer relationship with your true spirit and your true integrity. So this could also just wake you up, right? This could wake you up from a lethargy. Balkan says, sudden change is like a wake-up call from God. It shocks you into considering whether you've been traveling down the wrong path, and it gives you the chance to change direction. Many shocking events are simply out of your control, and there's no way you could have foreseen them or prepared for them. But some shocks occur because you have been unwilling to face facts. Perhaps you've convinced yourself that something you don't want to happen could never happen, or perhaps you've been blindly pursuing an unwise or unhealthy way of life. Then one day, problems and fears you've neglected for so long suddenly catch up with you. You find that you have to confront them face to face. It is as if your unconscious self were giving you a not so gentle shove, forcing you to own up to your own actions and asking you point blank whether it isn't time to change your life. When this happens, it is partially accidental, but it is partially a function of the road that you have traveled up to this point. For that path has made the accident happen in a particular way, and it gave the events a particular meaning and force. In any case, whatever the causes, when upheaval arrives, it is up to you to make the most of the situation and learn from it. Search your soul and reconsider your attitudes. Have you been living your way of life the way it should be lived? Have you been treating other people the way that you should? As the text suggests, when thunder comes, it is time to examine yourself and put your life in order. Change has shaken things up. Think creatively. Open your mind and heart. If you can take advantage of this opportunity, something beneficial will come of it, right? Not all shocks are bad. Some shocks are the shock of good fortune. Oftentimes when we're presented with opportunities for growth, we can be afraid of that as well, because it's shocking us out of our preconceived notion of who we are, of how we define ourselves. Sometimes we keep ourselves small because we're afraid of change. And that can also be some of the things that this could represent. The shock of coming into a new situation, and that situation doesn't necessarily have to be bad. That situation could be the shock of success. We have one more symbol for you today, and that is our animal guide. Here we have the sea lion, which is funny because it's a new moon in Leo. And we're not just having a lion, but we're having a lion of the sea. So I'm going to read to you from Animal Frequency, which is a book by Melissa Alvarez. Okay? And this book talks about the sea lion and also the seal. I thought the sea lion was more appropriate for our new moon in Leo. She says seal symbolizes creativity, inspiration, and sensitivity. Seal doesn't have any natural defenses other than biting, so it lives in large groups, which offers the maximum protection for predators. It is a thick lining of blubber which keeps it warm in the ocean's cold water, and slick fur that makes it easier for it to swim. It can live for months in the ocean, even sleeping underwater. Sea lion comes ashore to mate, give birth, molt its fur, and escape sea predators. This means you often feel drawn to bodies of water, can undergo a complete transformation in your appearance if you so desire, and are creative in finding ways around the situation. So we are also seeing like the ability to change our appearances, change our roles. When sea lion appears, it means that while you're agreeable and friendly, most of the time your words can have bite if pushed. Because of your inner sensitivity, you may often regret any negative things you say and often take steps to make things right with the other person. Your personality is warm and caring, and you're an inspiration to others. You have a protective streak for those you feel close to, for children, for animals, and for those you feel have been wronged in some way. If seal or sea lion appears, it means to immerse yourself in your creative talents. Can you compose a song, write a book, create a beautiful piece of jewelry? How about painting? Your ability to create with color is a way to find calmness after a hectic day. You may even choose to pursue a career using your artistic talents. Seal or sea lion will appear when you've forgotten to be appreciative and joyful. It will show you how to find and express the happiness within yourself. This spirit guide assists you when you need to be alert to changes that require adaptability. Sea lion knows when to change environments for reasons of safety or practicality. But listening to sea lion's message, you will instinctively know when you need to make changes to ensure easy transitions. Seal or sea lion assists us when we've been having dreams that we've been having trouble interpreting. It can help you to see the symbolic meaning of your dreams and how to apply its meaning to your daily activities. Sea lion can also jumpstart your creativity through inspiration. Seeing these situations in a different light can give insights and clever ways to implement what you're trying to achieve. If you're feeling uncomfortable in a group, sea lion can help you fit in and feel at ease. Sea lion helps you to see your beauty both inside and out. And maybe, because we're talking about the harmonization of those two things, harmonizing that beauty, your inner expression, your inner beauty with your outer persona, your outer personality. All right, my friends, that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much with being here today. I appreciate all of you. Appreciate any of you new folks that are coming over from Sag Moon Magic. Do me a favor, go support them over there. Support my beautiful daughter and her new account. Check out the sale if you want to get 20% off all my recordings. Use the code SAGMOONMAGIC. It's all sorts of cool stuff. Decan webinars, dignity and devotion, magical practice webinars, stars and cards if you want to learn the tarot. All sorts of good stuff there. Reach out for a reading over at SpencerMichaud.com. If you need some extra guidance and help, I'd be more than happy to work with you. And go follow me over on social media. I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, the Bird app, Threads, at Spencer Michaud, without the astrology on the end of it. I'm not actually on TikTok, but I'm on those other platforms, and I'm most active, I think, on Instagram if you'd like to follow me there. Also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I have a Facebook page as well. So that is what I've got for you today. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. Hang in there, friends. I know that we've got some stuff that is difficult in the collective, but we're much stronger together than we are as islands of separation. Be kind to one another on this journey. Accept one another as you are, as your most authentic self. Try to contribute something positive into the world, oftentimes through kindness. And we'll be here to guide you through on the journey. I hope, we'll keep on just trying to point the way. And I'm just the guy going through it with you. And I'm so, so grateful that you're all here, and really appreciate all of you. So thank you for these nice comments here. Thank you, Rachel Sue, for being here. Yeah, thank you for joining us, Rachel. I appreciate you. And welcome to our little live streams here. We go live every Friday or so in the afternoon, and really appreciate that you're here. Okay, well, thanks, and have a good week. Appreciate you. Have a good week, you too, my friend. And we will see you the next time. We're going to break down the astrology of August next week, I think. So make sure you join me for that. And I will see you the next time. Take care, friends. Peace.